I want to go through a little bit and disabuse people of the notion of the relative strength or weakness of the Biden economy. Let's start with jobs. We jokingly put together at American Moment sort of a bingo card ahead of the State of the Union of what we imagined a lot of the shibboleths that would come up is if someone had used it as a drinking game, they'd be dead. It was quite on the money. And one of the little sections we had was quote unquote most jobs ever. I think he has some statistics saying he's added more jobs in X period of time than any president. Is that true? If it's true, how is it misleading? If it's not misleading, then why shouldn't Republicans give him his due?
Well, it's one of the most irrelevant statements ever, I think. I mean, when you shut down the economy during COVID and you say small businesses can't operate and everybody has to stay locked up in their houses and nobody's working. We have these huge supply chain problems. And then now, a couple of years later, we actually have more people working. I mean, that's not exactly a great achievement. I mean, we're still struggling. I think everybody sees it from time to time with a shortage of workers. It's really a failure to get workers back into the workforce. I think that should be the line of criticism against the Biden administration with, the ridiculously long and over generous unemployment checks that, both President Trump and Biden were, and obviously Congress were complicit in that. But I mean, when you pay people more in unemployment than many of them make to work, people are generally going to do the calculation and say, well, I don't think I'll go to work. And so everywhere you go, you find, especially like in, the service sector and fast food restaurants, places like that, still got help wanted signs all over the place. So I think we're low on unemployment now. I don't think it's a selling point to say we have low unemployment now.
I saw this somewhere in relation to what the Fed's likely to do on monetary policy, but aren't we sitting at the lowest unemployment since the 1960s? It's something like the putative number is like 3.4%. Why is that misleading?
Well, again, I think you got a lot of people who just left the workforce during COVID. They said, all right, well, everything's shut down. I can either get this unemployment check or I can go to work. Or many people made more money. A lot of them, I think, thought, I don't want to work in these circumstances where I'm being forced to wear a mask. In many cases, I'm in some cases being forced to get a vaccine. A lot of people just bailed out and said, all right, I've had enough. They haven't returned. I don't think that's a great development. I mean, I think in some cases, people are probably happy to have chosen that course, but nationwide, I don't think it's necessarily a great thing. I mean, we do have low unemployment. That's a positive. That's undeniable, but you got to put it in that broader context.
So I'm curious about how this number works because, what's that old line about lies, damn lies, and statistics or whatever? I think that with a lot of these econometrics that people use to describe the quality of the American economy, there's a lot of fudging that can happen. What exactly is the unemployment number as is promulgated in public policy, and why does it not capture the full story of what's going on? Well,
having not run the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I'm certainly not a real expert on this, but my understanding is that people who are not looking for employment are not counted. So it's basically a measure of among people who are looking for jobs, can you find one? And drive anywhere in America now and look at all the help wanted signs. It's not hard to believe we have a low unemployment rate. The businesses are desperate for workers.
Mm-hmm. So at this point in time, what are the incentives that are still on the table for people not to go back to work?
That's a good question. I don't know that the incentives are particularly, I think they've sort of expired. And yet it seems like there's sort of just a continuation of maybe people got enough in terms of the government handouts during that period that they're just still kind of coasting, that they haven't chosen to go back. They haven't found the right fit. I've heard of people who quit their jobs because they didn't want to deal with the mask or vaccine mandates, and they just haven't quite figured out where they want to go next. Mm-hmm. And they've got enough savings to make it in the interim. So I think it's more of like a boat that's going off and you cut the engine and it keeps coasting for a while.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Let's go to some other things that Biden talked about in his speech. He is touting being the biggest deficit reducer of any president in American history. I can imagine you were close to throwing a remote at the television as he was saying this. What exactly did he claim, and why is that misleading?
Well, you're talking about the possible drinking games. I mean, I would have bet my house that he would have made that claim. He was definitely going to claim he's said this before. He positions himself as this deficit hawk, which is just an extraordinarily I mean, that's really a shameless claim by President Biden, because the truth is that he's been the worst deficit president so far we've had in our entire history on an annualized basis. He, according to the Congressional Budget Office, he signed legislation that the last round, I think it was, of COVID stimulus spending in 2021 that increased deficit spending in 2021 alone by $1.1 trillion. So that's $1.1 trillion. That's not attributable to President Trump. That's Biden and the Congress. And so he's got that. And then the next year we have $1.4 trillion in deficit spending this year. That's $2.5 trillion that Biden's responsible for. He hasn't even been in office for 21 months. I mean, it's an extraordinary number. We've run up about as much deficit spending under Biden as we did during World War II after adjusting for inflation. And to say, well, the spending is much lower in 2022 than in 2021, when he signed legislation bumping up the spending in 2021 by over $1 trillion. I mean, that's just a shameless claim.
Yeah. Is most of that spending coming from Inflation Reduction Act, or where is it coming from?
Most of that came from the last stimulus package under COVID.
Okay.
The Inflation Adjustment Act adds a little more, but not nearly as much as that did in the short term.
Gotcha. One of the themes that Biden kept on coming to, which again, I think facially is compelling to someone who's just a regular voter looking at what's happening from the outside, is this, vast legislative record of accomplishments. Where do you think it's not all that, and is there any aspect of it that Republicans should look at and maybe be concerned that this is a real argument he can take to voters in terms of ways he's delivered for them?
I don't think most of this is particularly attractive to voters. I mean, ever since Biden got into office, he's been attempting to satisfy the desires of the left wing of the Democratic Party, which is now ascendant. I mean, he's, as many people have said, he's pretty much pursuing a Bernie Sanders agenda. If you love big government, the Biden administration has been a wonderful one for you. But I think the American people have seen and recognized the effects of some of this. I mean, the rampant inflation, I think almost everyone attributes that to some extent to the runaway government spending. More and more, you just have this constant regulation of all aspects of people's lives. Obviously, people are very concerned about the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, the school, what they learned with all the kids stuck home, not able to go to school when they should have been able to go to school, and seeing what the teachers are teaching and the indoctrination. And the Biden administration is busy pushing all that sort of indoctrination through executive orders and every way it can. Most of this, I think, is highly unpopular with the American public. I think Biden's image as the sort of everyday Joe, working man, and I think that's how he views himself. I think that is appealing to American voters. I don't think the policies are. Interesting.
I want to jump around a little bit, because while we're on this topic of deficit spending, American Main Street Initiative has put out the first of what I hope will be many quick hits. This is kind of a 4 to 5 page format document. I may be getting the exact page. 4-page document. You're going to be doing it on a variety of public policy issues, but this first one you made is on the national debt. I will be entirely honest. When people start talking about the national debt, I start falling asleep. Why should I care?
That's a good question. A lot of people seem to have that attitude. Why should we care? And it shows in how much debt we've racked up in recent years. I mean, for starters, I think one of the best arguments against all this deficit spending is that right now, when every $9 Americans send in tax money, the first $1 or so basically just gets thrown in the trash. Federal government takes it and doesn't spend it on anything. It just goes to interest payments on the debt. I mean, if you get forced to pay $9,000 in federal income tax, the first $1,000 is basically just wasted. I mean, that's a lot of money. This is costing Americans big time. And the only reason it's only that low is because we've had historically low interest rates now for quite some time. Until very recently, they're still pretty low historically. They start rising along with the rising debt. You're going to have larger and larger shares of your tax revenue just going to nothing.
I think someone told me recently the cost of servicing our debt per year is now greater than the budget of the Pentagon.
It's not quite there yet, but it's over, as of 2022, it's over $500 billion. Basically just went in the trash.
Yeah.
And this is not like, an individual person borrowing money to buy a house or Walt Disney borrowing a bunch of money to build Disneyland or something like this. I mean, a house appreciates over time more often than not. It's something tangible. This is like somebody an individual person or family who just decides, let's just go on a spending spree. Mm-hmm. Let's just go to the mall and we'll just buy whatever we want and we'll put it all on the credit card. And every month we'll pay the absolute minimum we can and we'll just get deeper and deeper into debt. Anybody would think that's a problem. Mm-hmm. It's a problem for a country as well. And it's a very serious problem. It's getting so much worse. I mean, to put it in perspective, when Ross Perot ran for president in 1992, and he managed to get 19% of the popular vote, mostly by talking about our out of control spending under George H.W. Bush. And it was bad.
And trade policy.
But I would say that was second to the remember all those debt charts and everything he had, I'm tempted to do my Ross Perot imitation. and he, 19% of the popular vote is massive for a third party candidate. Well, our debt at that time was $4 trillion. We're now at $31 trillion 30 years later. I mean, we stay on the same pace. If we run up as much debt over the next 30 years and the next 30 years as we have been, we'll be at $1.5 quadrillion in debt, which sounds like a fake number, right? I mean, it's 1,000 trillions. That's where we're headed.